Hi, everyone. It's Kirsten Hagland here. Thank you again so much for joining us for this special online conference brought to you by us here at Addiction Hope. If you're joining us for the first time during this special day, welcome. We've got a really amazing lineup of speakers today, and we're very, very thrilled and honored to have all of them and share them with you. So welcome. We are about to introduce our keynote speaker for today. We're very honored to have him here. That's Brian Cuban. He's an author, an attorney, and a speaker, and a recovery advocate extraordinaire. He just has an incredibly brilliant story, and we're very honored to have him. Before I introduce Brian and let him come on and share his thoughts, I'll just read you a little bit about him. He's the younger brother of Dallas Mavericks owner and entrepreneur Mark Cuban, if you recognize that last name. He is a Dallas-based attorney, author, and addiction recovery advocate. He's been in recovery from alcohol, cocaine, and bulimia since April of 2007. His first book, Shattered Image: My Triumph Over Body Dysmorphic Disorder, chronicles his experiences living with and recovering from 27 years of eating disorders and BDD. Brian's most recent book, The Addicted Lawyer: Tales of the Bar, Booze, Blow, and Redemption, is a look at how addiction and mental health issues destroyed his career as a lawyer and how he and others in the profession redefined their lives in recovery and found redemption. So without further ado, welcome, Brian, to the conference.
Thanks, Kristen. Thanks for having me on this great conference. It's always a pleasure to participate.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have been such a great friend to Eating Disorder Hope and Addiction Hope over the years and been so open and transparent in sharing. And I want to thank you for that. Of course, for those who don't know you and the battles that you've been through and how you have triumphed, can you talk a little bit about your story all the way back to the beginning to how, because no one chooses an addiction, you know, these things are so complicated and complex, but how did this struggle begin for you?
For me, we have to go all the way back to my childhood. As is so often the case, we talk about where we are, but we don't talk about how we got there and all the environmental factors that went into it, because there is a difference between cause and correlation, right? We have all these things, childhood trauma, that go into addiction and eating disorders. I was the middle of three children. People know my older brother, Mark, or may not, Shark Tank and the Mavs. I have a younger brother, Jeff. Mark, as you might guess, Mark was the firstborn. As you might guess, he was very outgoing and very entrepreneurial, selling this door to door and selling that door to door. You kind of knew what he was going to be even in his teens, and he became that and a little bit more. My younger brother, Jeff, the last born, was obviously younger brother, last born, yes,
Yeah.
was a jock, nationally ranked wrestler, beer parties, prom, and all the things I kind of wanted and I associated with love and acceptance. But unfortunately, I was classic middle child syndrome. I was shy, I was withdrawn, and I internalized anything negative said about me and to me and wore it like a skin-tight suit is who I was. And unfortunately, I also had a very difficult relationship with my mom. And I'm going to talk about this, but I want to make it clear to everyone listening today or watching today, I do not blame my mother for the things I went through. There is a difference between cause and correlation, but the home environment and trauma in childhood does correlate with a lot of things that go on in adult life. So it's important to talk about that. My mom and I there was a lot of fat shaming in my family. My mom would come home from selling real estate. This was back in the 70s, and I would be eating Chef Boyardee ravioli out of the can. I used to love Chef Boyardee ravioli. And she would see me doing this, and she would say, Brian, if you keep eating that way, you're going to be a fat pig. And these were the things my mom's mother, my grandmother said to her. And these were the things my great-grandmother said to my grandmother. Fat shaming in families is often handed down generationally. I do not blame my mother for that. These were the tools she was given as a young mother in the 70s. And so, as you might imagine, as someone who didn't understand the psychology of these things, didn't understand cause and correlation, I was just a teenager. I grew depressed at hearing these things because there was nothing I valued more in life than love and acceptance. And I believed that my mother didn't love me. And she did love me intensely. She did love me. She was just repeating cycles. I began to eat more Chef Boyardee ravioli and more, and I became a bigger Brian and a bigger Brian. And it so often happens when kids start to change for what other kids perceive in the negative in school, as I became heavier and my stomach started to grow outward, the bullying started, the fat shaming at school, the teasing, you're a fat pig. Well, these kids must have talked to my mom, right? And it all culminated one day when I was walking home with these kids who I perceived as the popular kids. They were the kids going to the beer parties, the kids going to the school dances, the kids getting their first kiss, the kids holding hands, all the things I equated with acceptance and wanted so badly. I wanted my first kiss. I wanted to be invited to the prom. But in my mind, anyone that I would ask, any girl was looking at me and saying, you're too fat, you're too ugly, you're a fat pig. So I would never ask because I projected out all these horrible things. I'm walking home with these kids about a mile from school, and I was wearing these gold, shiny, bell-bottom disco pants that my brother Mark had given me. For those who were too old to remember and have probably never seen have never seen Saturday Night Fever and John Travolta, they're the kind of pants you would imagine John Travolta. Go online and see, and then imagine them on me. No, don't imagine that. Because the pants fit Mark fine. He wasn't a big guy. The pants on me, you have to imagine these skin-tight pants where I had to jump up and down to pull them up and spray the water bottle. My butt looked like 15 cats back there. But I didn't care because my brother Mark gave me these pants, and I love my brother, and they were a sign of his love for me, and I was going to wear those pants to school every day. And I did. And the kids made fun of me because they looked really tight on me. My stomach hung over them. But I didn't care. And one day I'm walking home with these kids, and they're making fun of the pants. And they decided that I was just too, quote unquote, fat to wear these pants. They just looked too funny on me. And before I knew it, these kids, who in my mind were the popular kids, who I kept hanging around even though they bullied me and made fun of me, because one day these kids would accept me into the group and I would be the popular kid. I would now be accepted. They physically assaulted me a mile from my house and tore those pants off me, my shiny gold bell-bottom disco pants, tore them into shreds down to my Fruit of the Loom tighty-whities. Imagine me now wearing my tighty-whitey pants from Sears and Roebuck, a shirt, my tube socks from the 70s, and these kids go on laughing like they had done the funniest thing ever. I go out in the street, I pick up the shreds, I go back to the sidewalk, I put them over my underwear, and I waddle on home. No one stopped, people gawked. And I got home and I went into our basement. In those days, growing up in Pittsburgh, PA, we had what was called an incinerator, where we put our garbage. I threw those pants into the incinerator, hoping to incinerate my shame, incinerate that moment, and wipe out any inkling of what had happened. But of course, I couldn't wipe it out in my mind that I had been shamed and that I felt ashamed of myself. And these kids had validated everything I felt about myself. And it was right around there, Kristen, right around then, that I remember really thinking to myself that I was this fat pig who would never be loved, who would never have a girlfriend, who would never get that first kiss, and who would be alone his entire life, and that no one loved him. And that now my brother wouldn't love me because I had allowed these bullies to take away the pants he had given me and destroy them. And it was then that I remember looking in the mirror and seeing this monster, just seeing this fat, ugly monster. It was the beginnings of body dysmorphic disorder. And body dysmorphic disorder is when you take a small or even non-existent perceived defect in your reflection and exaggerate it to the point where it affects your ability to function, quote unquote, normally in life. For me, I saw this huge stomach. Other people may exaggerate a small or even non-existent defect in their face where they don't leave the house. And so, or plastic surgery becomes a problem. It actually became a problem for me. I spent a lot of money on plastic surgery. And so this fat pig now that I saw in the mirror, I would carry with me to my freshman year in college. My father drove me to my freshman year at Penn State. In my mind, I was so happy because I would get away from the bullies. It would be a whole new Brian. I would make friends. I am in the dorm, Kristen, my freshman year. I'm looking out this dorm window into the parking lot, seeing all these kids, and everyone's happy. Everyone's having a good time. My father's helping me unpack. Everything's great. This beautiful, crisp, cool Penn State fall morning that could transform me into a new Brian. I make eye contact with this brown, curly-haired girl. She's talking to a couple of her friends. Just boom, like I'm looking at you. I just make eye contact. I start sweating. In my mind, I envision my life with this girl in the next 15 seconds. We're going to date. We're going to get married. We're going to have 2 1/2 children. That's my new girlfriend. Somebody likes me. She turns to her friend. She looks at me, puts her hands over her mouth and goes, ugly, ugly. Now, I am not the first young man or young woman to have nasty things said to him. Bullying happens then, happens in college, happens in law school, and it happens between adults. Not a lot has changed except in the way it happens. Back then it was brick and mortar, someone going ugly, right? Or someone tearing off your pants. Going viral meant 15 kids in the lunchroom knew about it.
Right.
A much different era.
Yeah.
But it didn't hurt any less. And it was just that one more thing. And I don't blame that girl for it. I mean, I don't blame her. But it was just that one more thing that, in my mind, validated that chain of events. And I remember thinking in that moment, we remember bright line moments in eating disorders and addiction. You remember bright line moments. That was one of my bright line moments when I decided my entire life was out of control. Again, really validating I would never be loved, not by my mother, who did love me, but in my mind, she didn't. That validating a lifetime of unhappiness and a future that I could no longer see other than unhappiness. How could I get control of my life? What did I have control over? Nothing. Well, no, one thing, I had control over food. But I didn't want to eat more to soothe myself because I associated that with bullying. I would just get bullied more. What was my path to love and acceptance? Well, I had to lose weight. I had to become thin like that girl. I had to become thin like everyone in my mind who was popular in high school, right? Because those days we didn't have the internet. Our images were the kids we saw every day. The popular kids, the prom queen, the prom king. And in my mind, and this was the images I carried to Penn State, they were all beautiful, good-looking, thin, or muscular. That was it. Those were all the popular kids. No one was fat. So I had to get thin. How could I do, and that was the road to popularity and acceptance and self-acceptance. So I began to restrict my food intake and restrict and restrict and restrict. And before I knew it, I had descended into anorexic behavior at a time when no one was talking about it. This was 1979.
Especially among men.
Especially among men. The singer Karen Carpenter hadn't passed away yet. She was a wonderful singer, and she passed away from complications related to anorexia. But she kind of brought anorexia for females into the pre-digital national spotlight. But for a guy, forget it. I didn't know what eating disorders were. I didn't know what anorexia was. And later that same year, I transitioned into bulimia, which is the act of binging and purging. And I know this is an addiction conference, but you have to understand the transition of behaviors to understand how I got where I am today. And my eating disorders were a part of that transition. So I transitioned into binging and purging. And every time I binged and purged, I got a high, Kristen. I felt this high, like for those few moments, everything was going to be okay. The next day would be okay. The next day, the bullies would like me. The next day, that girl would like me. The next day, my mother would love me. But of course, when those few moments and that high went away, the shame fills the void. The shame sweeps into my stomach. the shame of an act that I didn't understand. I didn't know what bulimia was, but an act that gave a few seconds, 15 seconds of peace. So I had 50 and over again, and the life of a male bulimic, the life of a failed bulimic. And so that was the beginning of there. Okay, Kristen, because I just saw a picture freeze.
Yep. I was waiting to see if it was going to.
Kristen, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but your face is frozen. So I don't know why. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
My connection looks fine here.
Oh, there you go. You're back.
There we go. Great. Yeah, my connection looks. Sorry about that, everyone. Frozen Brian and frozen Kristen. We're good.
No worries. We're good. Right on ahead.
So I'm a bulimic. I'm a bulimic at a time when no one's talking about that either. But it was like a security blanket to me, and it was something that made me feel whole for a few moments. But then you have to deal with the cycle of shame, feeling whole, the cycle of shame, feeling whole. And that's not an uncommon process and not an uncommon cycle in bulimia. I graduated, I finished my freshman year at Penn State, and I went on to my sophomore year, and I turned 21. And before I knew it, I was a problem drinker using alcohol, because if I couldn't binge and purge my way into self-love, I would deaden my shame. I was drinking every morning almost. I was going to class hungover. I was going to class drunk. I was going to class intoxicated. I was drinking at night. I would have to get drunk just to leave the house to socialize, because if I socialized sober, they were all looking at me and thinking, that's a fat pig. I could never be his friend. I will never like him. And I was projecting that. So the only way to deaden that feeling was to drink. And before I knew it, moving into my junior year at Penn State, I was a quote unquote alcoholic. And I was not aware of any kind of treatment. I did not know what an alcoholic was. I remember the closest I came to any self-awareness in addiction recovery back then with regard to my problem drinking was walking into a hamburger joint. In the 12-step groups, the largest alcohol-related 12-step group is Alcoholics Anonymous. The 12-step groups put out these pamphlets called the 20 questions. Answer this many questions and you in the positive, and you just might be an alcoholic. And they were geared towards college students. Do you black out? Yes. Do you miss class? And I'm answering it, yes, 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 yes. Crinkle it up, throw it in the basket. I'm just a college student. We all drink. That was about it. That was about as close as I came. But I was able to graduate from Penn State, and I did okay because I was able to really sometimes pull it together before a test, pull an all-nighter, and give back the information the next day, which works in college, but I found out it doesn't work too well in law school. And so I graduated from Penn State. I wanted to be a police officer. That would have worked out well, right? I would have been the first guy in the evidence room stealing the cocaine. But I'm sitting in the placement office deciding what I want to do with my life. I was the criminal justice major. And I know I really didn't want to go out in the real world, because if I go out in the real world, I have to show everyone all of these disorders that I own and I'm keeping to myself. And there were two guys talking about going to law school, and the bells start going off in my head. Ding, ding, ding. Maybe I'll go to law school. I never thought about going to law school before. I didn't think of it in terms of, well, I can be a lawyer and that'll be great. My thought process was, those bells were, I can stay in school for 3 more years. I can binge and purge. I can drink, and I don't have to reveal my true self to anyone. I don't have to reveal the ugliness I feel inside to anyone. I don't have to reveal the ugliness I see in the mirror to anyone. That made perfect sense to me. That is why I went to the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. It was not to change the world. It was not to make a lot of money. It was not to help people as a lawyer. It was to hide for 3 more years. to hide from myself. And that made perfect sense, made perfect sense to me. So I took the law school admission test, and I did well enough to get into the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. And I remember pushing open the doors of the Pitt Law the first day I walked in there for 1L orientation, looking around the lobby at all the law students and projecting that every one of those kids were looking at me and saying, that's a fat pig. You'll never be one of us. You'll never make it here. And I think I even saw that curly brown-haired girl in there. Every girl, every female in that lobby was that curly brown-haired girl. And I immediately knew that I had made the perfect decision to go to Pitt Law. I did. I had made the perfect decision because this is the way it was going to be all my life. I was right. I could hide for 3 more years and everything would be fine. I could repeat those cycles. I didn't make the perfect decision because I would do well in Pitt Law. I made the perfect decision because my projection of thoughts validated everything I felt about myself once again. And as you might imagine, I wasn't a very good student at Pitt Law. Studying all night before an exam works okay in college. It doesn't work well in law school. I graduated by the skin of my teeth. I still have reoccurring dreams, Kirsten, about the dean of my law school. I go to pick up my diploma, and I'm grabbing for my diploma, and the dean of the law school is pulling it back and going, psych, you really didn't graduate. And I wake up grabbing for my diploma. But I did graduate, not as a very good law student. And once again, I have to decide, what am I going to do with my life? What decisions am I going to make? And once again, it was about hiding. How can I hide? Well, I have my law degree. I can't stay in school forever. I decided that I would move from Pittsburgh to Dallas, Texas, because both my brothers lived here in Dallas. And the love of my brothers would save me. I could be with my brothers. I would move in with my older brother, Mark, and everything would be fine. Their love would be all I would need to get me through life. If only love could cure addiction. Doesn't work that way. So I moved to Dallas, Texas in 1986. I moved in with Mark, and it was like throwing gasoline on a fire because they're young. They're in their late 20s. They're going out. They're having a good time. I fit right in. My drinking got worse. They didn't really notice anything. I hid my binging and purging very well. I had become an expert in camouflaging my binging and purging dating back to college, so nobody would know. My law school roommates didn't know. I've talked to them about this. They're saying, we didn't know you were bulimic. We didn't know you had a drinking problem. Good. That I was doing what I wanted. I was accomplishing what I needed to accomplish. So you didn't know. Not good in reality, but I had a PhD in camouflaging these behaviors. And in Dallas, it was just more of the same. And then in the summer of 1987, in the bathroom of a upscale hotel befitting my upscale addiction status, I was a high-class addict. I discovered the one thing that for 20 seconds, 30 seconds, I looked in the mirror for the first time in my life, and I loved the person I saw in the mirror. For the first time in my life, for 30 seconds, that curly brown-haired girl loved me. My mother loved me. Everybody loved Brian. Dallas loved Brian. I discovered cocaine. I did my first line of cocaine in that bathroom in that hotel in Dallas, Texas, and I instantly became psychologically addicted to cocaine. Not biologically, not physically. There is a difference between psychological addiction and physical dependence. The physical dependence would come later, and I would go through a brutal withdrawal. But I became addicted to looking in that mirror and loving myself. Because having hated myself for so long with this emptiness in my stomach, when that artificial feeling just swoops in, who wouldn't want that? Who would not want to feel that feeling for the first time, that overpowering, overwhelming feeling of self-love, even though artificially created? I had to have that again and again and again. cocaine and alcohol took over my life. It took over my life in the practice of law. It took over my life in my personal life. It took over my life through 3 failed marriages, all failing because I spent more energy in hiding my drug and alcohol issues than allowing myself to love and to be loved. It's not uncommon in relationships that are affected by addiction. When you put up this wall, this brick wall around yourself to hide what you feel about yourself, to hide what you are going through, and you put all your energy into that, that doesn't leave much room to let love in, and it doesn't leave any room to let love out. Yeah. And it eventually takes the path of least resistance to your significant other saying, you don't love me. And to say that I do means having to open yourself up, means having to risk, means having to stop projecting, means having to take a chance that the person that you marry, the person that really does love you wants to help you, instead of looking at you and saying, that's just a fat pig. You're not worthy of my love. It becomes easier to say, you're right, I don't. 3 marriages failing that exact same way. None of them lasting more than 2 years.
Wow.
It all finally came to a head in the summer of 2005 when I became so despondent, I became so hopeless that I would ever love myself, that I would ever be loved by anyone, that I decided to end my own life.
Yeah, hold on 1 second, Brian. Brian, just pause right there, and all of our viewers, just hold on 1 second. We're going to be right back. Just stay right there.
Sure.
Okay, everyone, thanks so much. I appreciate that. As with technology, things are always a little bit up in the air, but that's okay. Brian, keep going. I'm riveted.
That's all right. Well, okay, where were we?
You were talking about your marriage and your relationships. And
that's right. So the 3 marriages ended pretty much like that. The summer of 2005, I really decided that there was no hope, no future, and no hope of ever loving myself, of ever looking in that mirror and seeing anything but a fat pig and this huge monster born of body dysmorphic disorder.
Yeah.
I decided to take my life, and it was close. My 2 brothers, at the urging of a friend who did not mind his own business, and that's one of the things I talk about now in suicide awareness prevention, do not mind your own business. Risk being told to mind your own business. Risk it. He alerted my 2 brothers that he felt something was wrong when I emailed him for bullets to a gun. My 2 brothers came in my house. I was upstairs. There was a .45 automatic on my nightstand. Drugs everywhere, alcohol everywhere, black market Xanax everywhere. My younger brother came first. Mark flew in from Los Angeles. We waited for me. My younger brother took the weapon, cleaned up all the drugs and alcohol. And they took me in my first of 2 trips down to a local psychiatric facility, kicking and screaming. They're trying to save my life, my brothers who love me. I am thinking, just leave me alone. Let me finish what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
There was a total disconnect between what was happening and what I felt about myself in those moments. So they take me to the psychiatric facility. I'm a lawyer. I know what to say. I'm not a danger to myself. I'm not a danger to others. And in Texas, they couldn't hold me. So much to the chagrin of my 2 brothers, they couldn't hold me, and they had to take me back home. My brothers wanted to commit me, and they couldn't. So we did what I call the Cuban rehab. My brothers said, just stay in your house for 2 weeks. We'll take your car keys and everything's going to be fine. If only that worked, right? But my family's no different. My family was no different. All I thought about was, no problem, my drug dealer delivers. to go ahead and drop me off at home. They dropped me off at home, and for 2 weeks, my drug dealer delivered, and I learned two things from that experience. One, that I had to distance from my family, okay? Because not that I had a problem, that I had to distance from my family. And two, that I had to distance from the people, other people in my life who cared about me. So I started only hanging around with these people who did cocaine and drank. And now I am really just off the rails. 2006 comes around. My brother's NBA basketball team, the Dallas Mavericks, are going to the NBA championship for the very first time. And this is just to show you the quote unquote insanity of addiction. Yeah. I had the opportunity to get some really good seats for friends for those games. So I call my brother and I get some tickets for my friends. This was our first trip to the championship. It was a very big thing for the city, for my family. And so I get a couple tickets, some very nice seats for friends, and I didn't give them to my friends. You're probably thinking I sold them on sold them on eBay for some astronomical amount. I didn't do that either because that would be disrespectful to my family, to the team, to the city. I took them and traded them to my cocaine dealer for $1,000 in cocaine. Selling them on eBay is disrespectful, but trading them to my cocaine dealer is perfectly acceptable in my mind, how the mind works in addiction, right? So my cocaine dealer shows up at my house. I was a high-class addict. He delivered. The things we tell ourselves in addiction.
Yeah, of course.
I give him the 2 tickets. He hands me the cocaine. I run up to my home office. I dump all the cocaine out on my desk. I'm looking at it, this huge cocaine pile, like I want to put my face in it and go. Of course, I have to do some. That's why I bought it. But cocaine at this point, this is now 2006, had long stopped giving me the feeling that I had first gotten when I did it in 1987. The feeling of love and acceptance. And I had been chasing this feeling now for a long time that was never going to come again. Now it was just paranoia and pain. Well, maybe I need to change dealers. Maybe I need a new grade of cocaine. It was never about maybe I have a problem.
Yeah.
I did some and I got paranoid thinking I hear the cops outside, thinking that I see the street lights, the police lights, woo, woo, woo. So I take the cocaine, I put it back in the Ziploc baggie that my dealer had given to me in. I put it in the closet and I drive to a Home Depot. I'm sure everyone listening or watching knows what a Home Depot is, a home improvement store. And I buy electrical faceplate outlets, a drill, and a saw. I drive back to my house. I go to the drywall in each closet in my house, bzz, 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 and I drill a fake electrical outlet in the drywall of each closet. And I put the cocaine in separate Ziploc baggies and put a little bit behind each fake electrical outlet and close it back up, bzz, 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 thinking I'm the smartest lawyer ever. Like the cops, the DEA, and the drug dogs have never thought of that one before, right? But I thought I was being brilliant. I do a little more. Just once again, just pain and shame. Same evening, paranoia. I go back to each electrical outlet. Bzz, 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 take the cocaine back out of each electrical outlet the same evening because I'm paranoid. Put it back in the original Ziploc baggie and I flush it down the toilet. The next morning comes, there's another game. And as so often happens when a perceived negative event gets in the rearview mirror in addiction, I'm such an idiot. What did I do? I flushed all my cocaine down the toilet. There's another game tonight. Another call to my brother, Mark. Another call, 2 more tickets. Another call to my drug dealer. He shows up at my house, Kirsten. And I'm sorry, is it Kristen or Kirsten? I keep interchanging.
No, it doesn't. It's Kirsten.
Kirsten, okay.
Yeah, all good.
So he shows up at my house and he's looking at me, dude, you did all that cocaine? I didn't want to tell him I'd flushed it down the toilet. Yes, I did it all. I am the king cocaine of Dallas. I need more. I have a huge tolerance. Give me more. Okay, man. Here's another bag. Give him 2 more tickets. Take the baggie. Do some more. Once again, just pain and shame. Once more paranoia. back to each closet with the drill. Bzz, 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 bzz. Once again, put a little behind each closet and hide it. Once again, try some more. Paranoia, take it out and flush it down the toilet again. 2 nights, flush $2,000. Well, now probably about $970. $970 each night in cocaine. 2 nights, flushed almost $1,000 in cocaine down the toilet. The paranoia of addiction. And I had become paranoid, and the quote unquote insanity of addiction, right? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. But addiction is not insane. It is a biological process. It is a brain disease that it affects millions of people. And I was no different. Yeah. I was an alcoholic. I was addicted to cocaine. I had an eating disorder. I was not in recovery of any type. And I was really at a bottom in my life. My career as a lawyer was gone. My brother Mark gave me a job working for him. I failed miserably, showing up to work drunk, showing up to work high, not showing up to work. But Mark kept me on the payroll because he wanted to know at least that I was alive, even though I really wasn't doing anything. Well, isn't that enabling? Sure. And Kirsten, I admittedly was in a very privileged situation. 99.999% of the people out there don't have the privilege that I had to have a billionaire brother who was making sure that I stayed alive and making sure that, that I had a place. Yeah. I acknowledged that privilege. But addiction doesn't know privilege. Addiction doesn't know demographics. Addiction cuts across all swaths of demographics and economics. Yeah. And so I was just back out there, just doing it, unemployed, being supported by my brother. And then in January of 2006, I had met a girl. I had met a girl named Amanda, and we had started dating. I met her when I was out at one of my week-long birthday celebrations in Dallas. They would start, my birthday's on January 11th, and it would start when the cocaine started, and it would end when the cocaine ended, and it would go all week at a different bar, or I'd go to Las Vegas, or I'd go to Miami where people wouldn't know me, but they were generally week-long celebrations. This one was in Dallas, January 11, 2006. She came into this place where I was celebrating. She doesn't use drugs, and she was a very light drinker. She happened to come in after a football game, and we started talking, and I was able to pull it together to look halfway respectable. And we started dating, and she moved in with me. And again, I had a PhD still in hiding my issues, even though it was getting harder and harder, because as we know, when we sink deeper and deeper into addiction, it becomes, the window closes and it becomes harder and harder to wear those masks, right? As we approach that point where everything comes together, where that gray area between love, enablement, and recovery comes together, it becomes hard to hide it. And I was able to hide it only for shorter periods of time, but she moved in with me. And it was Easter weekend 2007. She went away to visit her parents. The next thing I knew, it was a Friday. The next thing I knew, Kirsten, I'm in bed. She's looking down at me. 2 days had passed. There's cocaine everywhere. There's alcohol everywhere. I'd had a 2-day drug and alcohol-induced blackout. I had gone out. I don't remember where. She's looking down at me, thinking, did I walk in the right house? Yeah. I'm looking up at her thinking, what lie can I tell to get me to explain this, this scene? And she's a lawyer as well. She wasn't buying any of it. So I decided, okay, I kind of ran home to Mama. Take me back to Green Oak Psychiatric Facility. I can think of a lie on our way there. You've been to a psychiatric facility? Oh yeah, there are some things I haven't told you about my past. And so we go back to Green Oak Psychiatric Facility, Easter weekend 2007. We're standing in the parking lot of Green Oaks waiting for admission. She's crying, and I'm thinking she's gone. And a few things occurred to me in that parking lot standing there waiting for admission. One, there wouldn't be a third trip back because I'd be dead. Two, she was going to leave me. I'd leave me. I mean, we hadn't been dating that long. She actually stood by me. She stood by me, And she stuck with me while I found recovery. We dated for over a decade. While I found recovery and rebuilt the broken trust, rebuilt the trust I destroyed. Not for her, I had to do it for me, because tragedy happens, people come and people go, and recovery has to withstand all of that, no matter what happens. It had to be for me, not for anyone else. And we ended up getting married, and we'll have our 2-year anniversary next month. So,
and congratulations.
Thank you. So not all relationships will survive these things, but it is possible. But I had to do the work, and I had to do it for me.
Unbelievable.
And the third thing I thought about in that parking lot was something our father had said to Mark, Jeff, and I growing up. He would say, guys, wives may come and go, and he's kidding. You know, he's being tongue-in-cheek. Girlfriends may come and go, and he's kidding, of course. But when push comes to shove, all you have is each other. No matter where, he said, no matter where you go in life, no matter where your journey takes you, no matter where you end up, you stay close. You call your brother. You tell your brother you love him. If you ask your brother if there's anything you can do for him. My father, like me, was the middle of 3 boys. He understood the bond of brothers, and he understood family. And he was giving us that gift that he had been given by his parents, the bond of family. He was passing that down to us.
Yeah.
And I thought about that in that parking lot, and I wasn't ready to give that up because my brothers had started to distance from me. That didn't mean they didn't love me, but they don't want someone who's high on cocaine, hungover, hanging around their nieces and nephews. I wouldn't want that either if I were them. I understood. And I was distancing from them.
Right.
And I didn't want to lose my family. I didn't want to lose that. And if you want to know how that gift stuck, all these decades later, 2018, from Pittsburgh, all these miles away from Pittsburgh, PA, Mark, Jeff, and I all live walking distance to each other. And until my father passed away 2 months ago, he lived across the street from me.
Wow.
That is how that gift stuck. I know everyone here is asking, what about your mother? What happened? That's an important question. My mother and I have a great relationship today. I was very lucky. My mother was willing to step into my recovery and talk about how she was raised, talk about the mentally abusive relationship she had with her mother, the tools she was giving, her verbally abusive mother. Her mother had her own mental health issues.
Yep.
And there was a very verbally abusive relationship and a very dysfunctional relationship around food with her and her mother. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't making excuses. And I wasn't looking for that. She said, this is the way it was. And when we both understood that as adults all these years later, other versus as a teen, where we just couldn't talk about those things, all the decades of blame and silence and cross-blame for something we couldn't verbalize to each other went away.
Yeah.
And I was able to forgive. And she forgave me. And it was fine. And it was fine. We were able to cross all those barriers of miles and shame and generational shaming and come to peace with it. And that was an important moment for me, that my mother and I were able to do that, because coming to peace with my past has been so important. Coming to peace and dealing with the trauma of my childhood was so important. When I talk to lawyers and law students or anyone dealing with eating disorders or addiction, it's easy to, if we're talking, we're going to talk about where we are, right? I'm having this drinking problem. I'm having this problem. I'm having, I binge and purge. That's, if we're going to talk, that's what we're talking about. But when you start talking about how you got there, that becomes very difficult. I've had people tell me for the first time about physical abuse, about sexual abuse.
Yes.
And I am not a treatment provider. So obviously I say, do we need to help you get to somebody? But the hardest part for me, Kirsten, was not dealing with where I am. Getting sober was hard, but that wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was carrying back all the layers of my life.
The emotional underpinnings of the illness, yes.
Back to that bullied, hurt, shameful feeling little boy who didn't think he would ever be loved. The hardest part of my life, and something I do ongoing and talking to that little boy and telling him he was loved, was cutting that chain that I had been dragging around with that little hurt little boy on it, on this huge tire on a gravel driveway, dragging it through my life as this huge weight on me, instead of working on letting him know he was loved, that it's okay, and letting him grow up and cutting that tire. And I work on that in counseling every day. I went into 12-step, and I'm still in 12-step today. That may not be for everyone, but that was my journey, going into 12-step, alcohol-focused 12-step. AA is the most well-known one. I see a psychiatrist. I have a funny story about my psychiatrist. The day after all of this happened and the psychiatric facility, and Amanda moved out, I go into my psychiatrist's office, who I'd been seeing for a few years, and just lying. Well, why would you lie to your psychiatrist? Shame knows no hourly rate, right? Yeah. I was ashamed. And so I was just getting antidepressants, telling I'm depressed, and mixing antidepressants with cocaine and alcohol works really well, let me tell you. So it really was kind of a wash. Nothing productive was happening. And I finally got honest with him about everything but the eating disorder. I was still too ashamed as a guy. And at that point, I knew I had an eating disorder. I'm in my 40s. And so we started talking about that. And he said, Brian, we have a lot of issues we have to work on. Yeah, well, I hope I'm paying you for more than that. But you have to get sober. Would you consider residential treatment? And I kind of blew up. I'm not going to residential treatment. There are no lawyers in residential treatment, right? Of course there are. Yeah. You know, and I'm an important lawyer. I have no clients, but I heard a car accident right out front, and I'm going to go get that guy, and I'll have a client. So I'm an important lawyer. My ego front and center. Would you consider 12-step? I'm not going into 12-step. There are no lawyers in 12-step. Of course, I walked in there, and half of them were lawyers. I can't go to 12-step. They smoke. I see them. I go by there, and they smoke. I don't smoke. I can't. You know, the secondhand smoke will kill me. So see the irony there. If you see the irony there, all right, there's always a reason to recover. But I finally did walk through the doors of 12-step. I finally did get honest with my psychiatrist, who I still see today. Been seeing him for 15 years. There's no shame in treatment.
Not at all.
I finally opened up and allowed myself to feel the shame, to talk about the shame. Shame is one of the big gatekeepers of recovery. Yes. The inability to talk about shame.
Yes.
So that is an ongoing process that brings me to today. I am moving on 12 years in recovery. I still see my psychiatrist. I still go to 12-step now and then. I have a wonderful relationship with my wife. I have a wonderful relationship with my mother. You know, I've even forgiven the bullies. I've forgiven those kids from all those years ago. I'm Facebook friends with a couple of those kids. Wow. I get asked all the time, don't you want them to know? Don't you want to tell them? I said, no, this isn't a reality show. I'm not. Right. I'm not Maury. You know, this isn't Maury Povich. I'm not the father.
Exactly.
These aren't 14-year-old kids. These are 57-year-old men who have children and grandchildren. There's no point in dragging that up. What I want for them is to have happy lives, hopefully having not repeated cycles, and teaching their kids differently about bullying. That's all I want for them. Then they were taught at a time when we weren't talking about bullying. There was no such word.
Yeah.
I mean, we weren't talking about that. No, of course not. And so it's interestingly, I got a Facebook friend request from my drug dealer who delivered. And
interesting. What do you do with that?
I said, huh?
What does one do with that?
Well, I said, dude, hand-to-hand cocaine exchanges on a college campus isn't a friendship. Okay, that's a business. If you're coming to me in recovery, I'm all about that. If you're coming to me in recovery, great. Everyone has a past, right? I have so many different friends in recovery who have been to prison, who have been this, that. Everyone has a past. I have a past. I've been to jail. I got my obligatory DWI dealing with all this stuff. I've been to jail. That was fun. They love lawyers in jail. They love to give lawyers a hard time in jail. So that
Brian,
was
your story is, and I've read bits and pieces of it before, is so phenomenal, and partially because not everyone makes it to where you are. Sadly, as we know, addiction kills. Eating
it
disorders
does.
kill.
It
And
does.
families don't all have happy endings. Um, and there is just so much brokenness in this field that people can lose hope. But you are this beacon of light and hope. And I wonder if there's someone listening to this today who feels like they've been struggling with their addiction and eating disorder and alcohol addiction for decades, how can they know that there is a brighter future?
It's a cliche to say recovery is possible, but it is. Recovery is possible. The hardest thing for me was breaking through stepping over this line. Okay, there is this line wherever we go, this wall we put up that seems that's there, but it's not there. Okay,
Right.
The fear of stepping over that into the unknown can keep someone in active addiction and active eating disorder for almost their entire life, or having tried once and not got where they want to be. So I'm going to repeat it. Recovery is possible. People relapse, whether it's eating disorders or addiction. Please pick yourself up. Step again. Reach out. People want to help. There are so many resources out there today that were not available when I was going through this. And remember, I did not go into recovery until a lot of those resources were available.
Right.
Okay, I didn't go into I struggled with eating disorders for over 2 decades. I struggled with addiction for a long time. And so now today I am still in recovery and I take advantage of these resources. People love you. People want to help you. And what happens is we project out the worst. We project out the absolute worst and get lost in that thought instead of stepping back and allowing yourself to be loved. Allow yourself to be loved because people want to help you. I'll help you. I'm sure you're available. People, there are all these resources. I mean, people do want to help, even if it's not your immediate family. Step out from the immediate family. Not everyone, there are a lot of dysfunctional families out there. My family was dysfunctional. We had our issues. But if you don't feel you can get it there at this moment, that's fine. Take a step back from that. Do you have a friend you can talk to? No. Take a step back from that. Is there something on a place online you can go to? No. Well, yeah, there is. Contact me. Contact you, right? You may not, maybe you're not going to the right place. There are all these resources. We may be able to help guide you. Recovery is possible. People want to help. You are loved and you are enough.
An incredible message, Brian. I could just listen to you all day long, and I know that many of the people watching could as well. But we are going to let you go and say thank you from the bottom of our hearts for your honesty and vulnerability and truth. It is exceptional. And I just want to thank you very, very much.
Well, thanks. And thanks for everything you do to raise awareness, Kirsten. And I hope to talk to you again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Brian. And just, Brian, before we go, we're going to, feature this video on Addiction Hope, where there are so many of those resources that Brian mentioned that we've talked about where people can get help if this story was inspiring to you. And Brian, also, why don't you let people know the name of your book again and where people can find it?
Sure. And first, anyone who needs help can reach out to me at briancuban.com. I will help you find a path. And you need resources, or the Addiction Hope and Eating Disorder Hope are wonderful resources. But if you need support, reach out to me. And you can find my book, The Addicted Lawyer, Tales of the Bars, Booze, and Redemption, on Bars, Booze, Blow, and Redemption. I don't know the title of my own book, on Amazon.com.
Perfect. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Brian, so much for your time. We will see you next time. And thank you so much for being such a good friend of Addiction Hope.
Thanks, and thanks for having me on this wonderful conference. Take care.
Thank you.